Hey everyone, it's Jake again. I wanted to share an update on my progress with the Medusa MCP server. So if you haven't been following along, we do Lambda Curry. Our agency does a lot of work with Medusa. And part of that is an initiative that I'm working on for an MCP server that can help someone who's working on an e-commerce storefront have access to all of the tooling through natural language. I wanted to showcase my progress, what we've been doing, and then where we're headed. I wanted to share again the list of all of the workflows that Medusa has. And it's just this incredibly long list of things that can be accomplished within the Medusa admin. And I'll share also why that is complicated. Each one of those workflows has like a get and a post, maybe a delete functionality. So as you can imagine, the list of tools that you would create to work within this ecosystem could be a lot. I think at one point I was up to counting 370 something tools, and we'll get to why that's complicated too. But originally I was working on building those all within a Medusa server. So the advantage of that is it was going to be super fast. Like you are working on an MCP server that's integrated into the Medusa server. So everything is just right there. You can use the workflows. There's no network needed. It's using the internal systems for updating the database. And it was just going to be super fast. I loved that. It was working great. Unfortunately, if I was going to spend time doing that, I don't know if I would get to sleep for the next year. We've switched our approach. Somebody had put out an example or just a proof of concept using the OpenAPI spec, and that motivated me to explore how we could use that OpenAPI spec to create an MCP server as well. And this is cutting edge. There are some controversies over whether or not this is the correct approach. If you're following Kinsey Dodds, he recommends against this because your MCP server, a lot of the times, are going to have slightly different requirements than just what a normal REST server would. It's an opportunity to rethink the user experience overall. And so there are disadvantages to just taking an OpenAPI spec and converting it to an MCP server because you don't get the full control. That being said, with something as big as Medusa and where we're going, I'll try to explain why I think it's a good approach. So we found this OpenAPI to MCP tools utility, and that gives us the capabilities to take the OpenAPI spec, which defines each of the REST endpoints, and convert those into tools and provide base URLs and just a little bit of other things that we can add to give control over how each of those endpoints are handled. And so what that allows us to do is we could spin up a new MCP server per Medusa instance, and you would get your own private MCP server based off of your Medusa instance. And so we're moving away from the MCP being within the Medusa server to it being hosted externally and providing the tools. And so where we're headed from this, if I can explain it, is that we would ideally be able to take a Medusa instance with custom plugins and custom overrides, and on build or on deploy, generate an OpenAPI spec that includes those tool sets and build our MCP server to include those plugins. For example, Lambda Curry has a reviews plugin that we built. Ideally, we would be able to integrate that with our OpenAPI server, and the AI LLM would be able to understand those tools and be able to say, hey, what are the ratings for this product? Let's respond to this review and say that we're grateful for them giving positive feedback, or negative feedback we can respond to as well. There's a lot of opportunity here, but it is complex. One of the complexities is that when you have this many 300 and something plus tools, the OpenAI, I think, limits you to 120, maybe 112. I don't remember the exact number. So you can't just say, hey, let's pass all of the tools over. Another challenge is OpenAPI is a very verbose, or at least the one that gets generated is from Medusa is very verbose. So it's a lot of context. And so when there's a lot of context, your calls get super slow. Okay, now let's look at what my initial prototype of how to solve this is, and this is where it gets cool and interesting and hopefully gives us a unique advantage to building this MCP server. The MCP server can provide an unlimited amount of tools. And I think hopefully we'll be able to solve this in better ways in the future. But my approach currently, if we look at the code, is to use a 4.1 nano call that provides a list of the tools that we want to pass to the LLM. So dynamically, based off the last few messages from the user, we're going to go and we're going to guess which tools would be helpful to respond. So it's just an initial quick say, hey, this user's wanting to learn more about products or wanting to make an update on this or get orders. It's a way that this nano LLM, so hopefully really fast and cheap, can get all that context and then provide the list of tools to our next call, which I'm using 4.1 mini currently. It could be anything. We'll be able to take in those filtered tools and provide updates. So it's just a step in front that's hopefully really quick, providing the filtered list of tools to the LLM. And in my experience, it's been a lot faster. So let's refresh this and I can show off how quick it is still. It used to be pretty immediate, but I think 4.1 is pretty quick as well. So we can ask, what are my Barrio branded products? It's going to go run a query. We can look at all that in a second and just return. And actually output is faster than it used to be, but I think the initial request is a little bit slower. So offsets. So you can see it queried for Barrio, got a limit of 10, and it returned the 2 Barrio branded products that we have. Now, let's try something that I haven't done before. Let's say, what orders do I have? Great. Okay. So admin get orders. This is one advantage of using the OpenAPI spec is I now have access to all of my tools. Now I still do provide a whitelist. So that will help me narrow down the tools that I think are going to be most useful. Like we don't need access to batch things or API keys. We can still limit what gets added to the tool list by providing that whitelist. And overall, I think it will help drive the user experience for this chat. Anyway, I know this was a lot of rambling and just excited about the progress that we're making, but I am optimistic that we'll be able to get to a time where we can auto-generate those new plugins and new MCP tools based off of your custom Medusa instance. And so that's my vision for what we're working on. Hopefully we can provide more updates soon. All right, thanks for following along and reach out if you have any questions. Let me know if you want to see anything or just discuss AI or MCP servers or Medusa. All right,